I'm back in my kitchen with my son, and we are working on another activity, okay? So this one requires some freezer paper and some t-shirts and some fabric paint along with an iron. So first thing that I'm doing, which is what I have here in front of me, is I'm going to iron this shirt. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing. All right. So I'm going to lay it out nice and flat on my ironing board. I have a small tabletop ironing board. I do not have a tall standalone one. I wish I did. It would kind of come in handy because then I would have space on my table. All right. I don't have my iron set to steam. I just have it on a non-steam setting. I don't know what yours says. Every iron is slightly different. You might not even have steam, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron the shirt. I have washed and dried this shirt, okay? This was a new shirt. It doesn't have to be a new shirt, but you could use an old shirt. I've selected a 100% cotton shirt. It works best if it's 100% cotton, but it does not have to be 100% cotton, okay? So I'm ironing out the folds in the shirt because I want it to be nice and smooth when I put on my stencil, all right? Now, my stencil, I used freezer paper for, okay? Freezer paper is a large white roll of paper. It is very similar to what if you go to the butcher or you go to the meat counter at Hy-Vee or Fairway and you have them wrap up meat that they have fresh. That's butcher paper, okay? I would not recommend using, or it's freezer paper, I would not recommend using paper that you've already used, okay? So I've ironed out the wrinkles, okay, and the folds, because this we've had for a while. We were waiting to get all of this stuff, okay? So I ironed all of that out. It's nice and flat, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stencil that I made, okay? All right. So this one is for my son. Red is his favorite color, so I chose a red shirt.
Yeah.
And then I have the freezer paper, okay? Now, the freezer paper has two sides, okay? The one side looks like paper, and the other side is very shiny. I don't know if you can tell that or not, okay? But then I took a craft knife, and I very carefully cut out the dinosaur, okay? So now what I'm doing is I'm deciding where my stencil is going to go. This is a one-time use stencil. So if you're thinking, oh, I could make my whole family a bunch of shirts, you could. For this, you would have to use it this way. You would have to cut out more than one stencil because it's a one-time use stencil, okay? Freezer paper can be found at Hy-Vee, Fairway. I've never seen a store brand of it. All I've ever seen is Reynolds, a name brand. So I'm going to take my stencil and I'm going to put one of my kitchen towels on top of it because, well, I don't want the chance that any of that wax on the other side gets onto my iron because then it makes it sticky and gross. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it down. I don't want to iron back and forth like I showed you when, that was probably very jiggly, sorry. I don't want to iron back and forth like I did when I showed you how I was taking out the wrinkles because I don't want to lift up parts of
the paper.
The paper, parts of the paper stencil because then that would be bad, all right?
And my mom will have to buy a new shirt.
Actually, I don't know that I would have to buy a new shirt. I would have to redraw the stencil and recut it out, okay?
Yeah.
So what did I do to make the stencil?
You used something that my grandpa gave my mom.
I used the internet, and I found a picture. Actually, I found two pictures. All right, I found one picture that I wanted to use for my sons, and one picture that I wanted to use for me. All right, so I printed it off, and then I put the freezer paper on top of it. The freezer paper is very easy to figure out what is the paper side and what is not, because you can't draw on the back of it. Okay, it's very waxy and it doesn't let you. Okay, so it's pretty easy to figure out. But I didn't need a light, a window, nothing. I could draw right through it. Okay, so then I traced it, and then I cut out the dinosaur. See, here's the dinosaur.
Yeah.
I cut out the dinosaur, and using a craft knife or an X-Acto knife is what I usually call them. Okay, it has a very thin blade, and I made a very nice, clean cut, because when I was slowly cutting around it, I knew that the outside was what I was going to be using as the stencil, okay? You could do it the other way, and you could use that positive space, that dinosaur, which is the positive space, and then you could paint around it, and it would make the dinosaur, in this case, the red, instead of him being a silhouette of whatever color we use, okay? So you could do it that way. Or you can do what I did, and you can, it's still not quite smooshed on there yet. Well, I'm going to end this video, and I'll come back, but basically what I'm doing is I'm going to increase the temperature on my iron. I am ironing on that stencil. I got my son's ironed on, and I wanted to show you something with mine, okay? Mine has some space on the inside of it here where there's going to be, where there would be spots or blotches of paint, okay? So I've cut out the paint blobs, all right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrange those on the palette however I would like. All right, so I wanted to show you this because sometimes you might have some spot where you're like, oh, I have an area on the inside that I need to cut out. Okay, so here's the black and white picture. So these white spots are what I am placing. Okay, and obviously I don't have to make them exactly where they are in the picture. I'm not even trying to do that. But I cut out this big section as one piece, and then I cut out those smaller sections. Okay, so I have this big piece that I cut the holes out of, and then now I'm putting them on here. Okay, so I found that if I set my iron down and count to 10 slowly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that works pretty well at getting them stuck on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm not going super fast. I'm not going super slow. Okay. I did turn my iron up to as high as it would go, which is a cotton linen setting, which for mine, it says it's supposed to have steam. There's no water in my iron, so there's no steam. So that's all right. If I did have water in my iron, I would want to make sure that I emptied that out or steamed it, so that way, you know, not on my project, but somewhere off my project, so that way I could let that that steam out of the iron, so I didn't have it coming in contact with the freezer paper. Okay, so this is the first step, is getting it ironed on. What I noticed when I moved my son, so that way I could do this one, is that it sticks, but it is a very temporary stick. So I have to be careful. So I very carefully moved his, so that way I could iron mine. So if you need to, if you're like me, where you have a small amount of space and you're going to have to put some stuff away and get some other stuff out, just be very careful when you move it. It's not like you can be like, oh, throw it on the floor and come back to it 3 days later and it's going to be perfectly fine. I suppose if you left it just like this 3 days later and you came back, it probably would be perfectly fine. But if you need to put it away temporarily or be able to move it to get out the next part, make sure you're doing it carefully. So I have these stencils ironed onto our shirts. Now what we did was we picked some paint colors, all right?
This one's my mom's. This one's mine.
We have green, and then we have a metallic light blue. Now, because I have tons of acrylic paint, I bought, it's a fabric medium, so it's something that you add to paint to make it fabric paint. If you don't have paint already and this is something that you want to do, then I would suggest just selecting fabric paint. You can get one color, you can get multiple colors. You don't want puffy paint, you want a paint that you could use with a brush. Following the directions on the bottle, and this comes in a variety of things. This was just happened to be the only one that I could get online that was in stock that would actually come. So it says mix 1 part of this to 1 part of acrylic paint. So I'm going to measure. Now these are my own measuring things, so I'm just using a measuring spoon. I don't need a lot of it, so I'm going to make a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons of paint. I want to make sure that I have enough, so I'm pouring it into my tablespoon. I'm going to do 2 just to make sure I have enough. So I'm going to pour it, and then I'm going to use another kitchen spoon, and I'm going to scrape it out because I want it to be accurate. All right, it's just kind of like making anything else. All right, so it's an even mixture. It says 1 part to 1 part. Okay, so here's 1 part. All right, so there's 1 tablespoon. I'm going to make another tablespoon. Now, I'm going to wash these as soon as I am done. So yeah, it's going to come off. If you sit your acrylic paint around and you don't clean it up and you let it sit there for a day, several hours, no, it's not going to come off, all right? But I'm going to clean it up with soap and water like it says to. All right, so I used 2 tablespoons of the color that I chose, and now I'm going to add my medium, which is 2, which would be 2 tablespoons, because it's 1 part to 1 part, of my
white.
fabric medium. All right, now the reason I needed the fabric medium, or you should buy fabric paint, is the acrylic paint itself is the plastic in it, which is what makes it acrylic paint, does not allow the paint to move with the fabric. So it becomes very stiff, and it can be uncomfortable if you're going to wear it. Now, if you're printing this on, let's say, something that's going to be a decoration and no one's going to be wearing it, and you're just using this as a way of making that nice design on there that you wanted to, then by all means, use just regular old acrylic paint. Now, if you have kids' temper paint and you mix this fabric medium with it. I don't know if it would stay through washing or not. All right, so I have mixed it up. I'm going to mix up my Sun's. This step here is probably not one that you might even need to do, okay?